You know, for centuries, the story we've been told about North America before Columbus was, well, pretty simple. It was an untouched, empty wilderness. But what if that story is just completely wrong? A wave of new evidence is revealing this incredible lost world of staggering complexity, and today, we're going to explore it. So that brings us to the most fundamental question, right? What was this continent really like before 1492? And the answer, as you're about to see, is so much more incredible than the version a lot of us got in school. Yeah, this is probably familiar. We all learned this story in class. This idea of a vast, sparsely populated land, a pristine wilderness just waiting for civilization. But as we're about to see, that picture is profoundly, fundamentally wrong. So let's start by just tackling that idea head on. We'll call it the pristine wilderness myth. And honestly, the evidence against it is just completely overwhelming. The sheer scale of what was here, it's kind of hard to grasp. Forget empty. We're talking about a continent with millions and millions of people. And they were organized into societies with 29 distinct language families. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more linguistic diversity than existed in all of Europe at the same time. And these weren't isolated groups, not at all. They were connected by these vast continent-spanning trade networks. To really understand this world, we have to start by basically tearing up the old timeline. And I don't mean just tweaking the dates. No, new discoveries have forced us to completely rewrite the entire story of how and when people first arrived. For decades, the story was Clovis first. You've probably heard it. The idea that the first Americans walked across a land bridge, then through an ice-free corridor about 13,000 years ago. But the new evidence from White Sands, New Mexico, fossilized human footprints, it dates human presence to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. That doesn't just change the old model, it completely dismantles it. Just think about what this shift means for a second. The White Sands footprints prove people were deep inside the continent a full 10,000 years before the old start date. That's long before that supposed ice-free corridor even existed. So, if they didn't walk through the middle of the continent, how did they get here? Well, this is where the Kelp Highway theory comes in. It suggests that people who were adapted to the sea simply moved down the resource-rich Pacific coast in boats, completely bypassing those giant ice sheets altogether. It just makes so much more sense. So people arrived much, much earlier than we thought. But what they built once they got here, that's just as revolutionary to our understanding. And we're not talking about simple little settlements. We are talking about massive cities and feats of ancient engineering that just defy all our old assumptions. And here's where it gets truly mind-bending. The first monumental construction in North America, it wasn't built by farmers. It was built by hunter-gatherers. And that fact completely flips the traditional script of human development on its head. Just take a look at the site of Watson Break in Louisiana. Around 3,500 BCE, these non-agricultural people built this complex of 11 massive earthen mounds. And here's the kicker. This organized, monumental project predates the first Egyptian pyramids by centuries. Let that sink in. And if that's what hunter-gatherers could do, well, the cities that came later were on a whole other level. At its peak, the incredible Mississippian city of Cahokia had a population of around 20,000 people. To give you a sense of scale, that population made Cahokia, which is located near modern-day St. Louis, a true urban center. It was comparable in size to London or Paris at the exact same time in history. This was no small village. The city's grandeur is just hard to overstate. Its central pyramid, which we call Monk's Mound, is this colossal earthwork. In fact, get this, its footprint, just the base, is actually larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Okay, now let's head west, out into the desert, where a totally different kind of engineering mastery was on display. The Hohokam people of the Phoenix Basin engineered over 500 miles of irrigation canals. And they did this with stone and wood tools. Their engineering was so precise, it supported tens of thousands of people in the middle of a harsh desert. In fact, some modern canals in Phoenix still follow the exact alignments of these ancient waterways. That's just incredible. Now, the really important thing to remember is that these incredible engineering feats weren't just happening in isolation. They were all part of a deeply interconnected continent, linked by sophisticated networks of trade, communication, and politics. And a perfect example of this is chocolate. Yeah, chocolate. Scientists found traces of theobromine inside these old ceramic jars from Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. But cacao only grows way down in Mesoamerica. So this is definitive proof of a luxury trade network stretching at least 1,200 miles. This sophistication wasn't just in trade, but in politics too. The Haudenosaunee, who you might also know as the Iroquois Confederacy, created this really advanced form of government called the Great Law of Peace. And what's incredible is that we can date its founding to a specific day, August 31st, 1142. How? Well, their oral traditions recorded a total solar eclipse that day, and astronomers have been able to pinpoint it in time. How cool is that? So if North America was home to this vibrant, complex, interconnected world, why did it all disappear? And why did that myth of an empty wilderness take hold so strongly? So the conclusion from all this evidence, it's crystal clear. The land that became the United States was never, ever empty. For millennia, it was a vibrant, ancient, and deeply populated world system. That world system was shattered by the great demographic collapse that followed European arrival. Old world diseases, things to which native peoples had zero immunity, were absolutely catastrophic. They wiped out an estimated 90% of the population, maybe even more. And this right here explains the origin of the myth. The Europeans who arrived in later centuries, like the Pilgrims, they weren't stepping into a pristine wilderness. They were stepping into a widowed land, a landscape that had been recently emptied by plague. They basically mistook a graveyard for wilderness. So this leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. If a complex, representative democracy, one where power also descended through women, by the way, was developed entirely independently on this continent, centuries before any European contact, well, how does that change our understanding of where democratic ideals truly come from?